One of the things that struck me from the book is actually right in the beginning, where you talk about how the 1990s, post-Cold War, pre-war on terror, there was a room in our sort of political and sort of social landscape for both religious conservatives and sort of activists, social activists, to come to the fore of American politics. How did that inform the fight for gay marriage?
Yeah, I mean, so our politics were pretty low stakes in the 90s. You know, it's probably some part of the reason why Bill Clinton's sex life became the dominant issue in our national politics for a couple of years. Part of the reason that we had a lot of like really small bore things like, you know, midnight basketball and, you know, school uniforms being the things that presidential campaigns were fought over. And, you know, as I suggest, I think the end of the Cold War really ended the big foreign policy, national security debates before 9/11, you know, represented them. And there was, you know, something approaching consensus around the big economic questions about the role of government and such. And I think that just created a void in which basically as a country we like needed things to fight over. And there was an opportunity for a lot of social and cultural issues to emerge. And some of them were sort of silly and frittered away, like, you know, should we teach Ebonics in school, which we fought over for a while as a country, or pretended to fight over as a country, and that turned out not to be a salient one. And this one turned into a major civil rights revolution. And what had happened in starting in the late 70s and 80s was these two movements rose in parallel. The sort of gay rights movement, you know, people sort of trace the origin of the modern gay rights movement to Stonewall. It wasn't really until the late 70s that gay rights advocacy became professionalized and formalized, and not until the 80s it had real funding and a foothold in Washington. And by the 90s, you know, the gay rights movement was, you know, especially getting out from under the sort of urgent reactive demands of the AIDS crisis, in a position to sort of assert itself politically. And almost exactly contemporaneously, the, you know, religious right, the, you know, primarily evangelical Protestant right, but also in coordination at times with Catholics and Mormons and some fundamentalist Protestants, were ascendant too. And they end up having this ultimately symbiotic relationship, which is like they are almost built for conflict with one another, and this becomes the thing that they end up going to war over in the mid-90s.